Hello and welcome to my presentation. This is a recorded video for today's class. I will be speaking about language in the lieutenant, which is a very important notion that even the writer took into consideration. Some key elements to begin with. Some words like language is written 62 times in the lieutenant. Speak, which is also quoted 52 times, and we do have a lot of native language in the novel. So native language is very important for this novel. Kate Grenville, the writer of this novel, says explicitly that this novel was highly inspired by the work of William Dawes. If we have a closer look at it, in the author's note, it is written that on board the first fleet that brought convicts to Australia in 1788 was a young lieutenant of marines, William Dawes. Although nominally a soldier, he was a considerable scholar in astronomy, mathematics and languages. The record he left on the language of the indigenous people of the Sydney area is by far the most extensive that we have. It contains not only word lists and speculations about the grammatical structure of the language, but conversations between him and the indigenous people, particularly a young girl, Patyagarang. A bit later on, we are being told that he never returned to Australia, but he worked for the rest of his life in the movement for the abolition of slavery in London, Africa and the West Indies. Kate Grenville says that she made extensive use of the historical sources in this novel, and in particular those language notebooks. So I thought it would be interesting to have a short look at what William Dawes' notebooks look like. If we head to a website called dnathan.com, we can actually read the notebook of William Dawes. It is entitled William Dawes' Notebooks on the Aboriginal Language of Sydney, 1790-1791. Full of references to the language of the natives in Sydney. So, as we can see, William Dawes has tried to create a written version of the language of the natives in order to be able to communicate with them. On the left is the transcription of the language of the natives in Sydney, and on the right is their translation. For instance, Nadiu, I don't know if I pronounce it right, but that means I did see or look or have seen. The notebook is mainly made of vocabulary that we can actually see in the lieutenant. There are a lot of passages in which the natives try to communicate, and it is a hardship, it is a challenge to try and understand what they are speaking about. Some extracts show that at some point communication was becoming more clearer and easier, and they actually understood that it was important for the both sides to be able to communicate, so they tried to work together to make it possible. So if we take a few extracts from the novel, we can see right here, in deciding to learn the language of the natives, he had thought to take a single step to write down the words. So that's one of the most important parts of the novel, because they are interested in actually getting to know the language and communicate with the natives. Then we can see some questioning on is it a good idea to do so. Right here it says, how would it be, just to speculate, if Tagaran had been chosen by the natives to learn the language of the great distance of people, to learn their ways, even perhaps to make sense of the marks on paper that were so significant to them, to understand all their private inner workings of intellect, custom, belief and feeling? So this very long question shows that they are wondering what will it be used for. We will come back to that later, but they did progress on learning the language. Here on this page we can see that they are practicing on how to speak that one native language. In green, there are some native language words, and then we have a comment which says, "This exchange was not a language lesson, it was a conversation. For the first time, he and Tagaran were on the same side of the mirror of language, simply speaking to each other. Understanding went in both directions. Once two people shared language, they could no longer use it to hide." So it continues with, "And Ganawa," he said, "to whom?" So we do have the translation of what the green words mean. "Charlotte Birang," she said, to the person belonging to Charlotte. So it opens lots of possibilities for them to actually establish a good communication. Now they try to practice together. Here we can see, for instance, "Camera girl," he said, slowly enough that Rook could hear the separate parts. Then he laid a hand on his chest over the lines of scars. "Cardigal," he said. "Cardigal." That suffix Rook remembered from Silk's list of words. Gal, tribe, or perhaps place. Warungin must be saying, "I am of the tribe or place called Kadi." So we do have characters who are able to understand that native language, to some extent. However, this knowledge of getting to know how to speak and understand this language, what was it used for? We have a first warning in this page. It says, "The gun is the only language the buggers will understand," Lennox said. "Mark my words, a few deaths and we would be shot of them for good. Forget all that flummery about amenity and kindness." Lots of other passages actually emphasize this very violent language that is used to describe the natives. In this page, it says, "Waymark went one better, made looking glass flash. 'Look, sir,' he cried, 'I will let you have it for your very own, if only you would come close enough to take it. By Jove, they are cautious. Barton, look at them like a cat that wants the cream but fears the milkmaid.' He laughed his tremendous laugh, and Rook thought that made the man braver. The grey-haired one took a step forward. 'Yes, that's the way, Mr. Darky. Come, come.' The sergeant did a ponderous little jig, and the man took a fresh grip on his spears. That one passage includes a very, very important word to mention. It is the word darky. They are using a language that is very aggressive and not respectful to the natives, because it is clearly discrimination. They are thinking that because of their color, they might be inferior to them. Another example is right here, where the novel tells us Wilstead joined a small crowd. "By God, they're savage," he said. "Dirty too, look at the filth on them." This again shows that they think of the natives as inferior people, only because they do not have the same ways of life, and they have a different conception of civilization and appearance, according to the settlers and explorers. This notion comes back several times in the novel, even though there are a lot of other passages where the communication between the two people are actually beneficial for both sides, and they do happen to spend time between each other peacefully. The fact that the natives might not understand the English language is a way to hide and speak of them freely, even in front of them. Sometimes the natives seem to understand that they are not giving very respectful comment on them, which is maybe why the native in the previous passage grabbed his spear to show that he disagrees with the way that they are speaking of them. We may also find it interesting to hear the author's comment on the novel and the notebooks of William Dawes. Here is what she says.
Tagaran and Rook are based on two real people who lived 200 and something years ago, 250 years ago. Tagaran is based on a young Aboriginal girl called Pachigarang, and Daniel Rook is inspired by the historical character of William Dawes. These language notebooks are incredible because what they write down, what they record, is not just a language, not just lists of words and templates of verbs, although that's there too, But Dawes wrote down entire conversations, whole exchanges, word for word, mostly between him and Pachigarang. And the powerful thing about it is, it really did happen. That conversation, if you wash yourself off and you shall become white, and no, I shall not become white, and the fact that he then realised that she was joking, all that really happened.
As you can see, the communication that was established between the two people seemed to have only good sides. They were able to joke and speak together. However, even if they were finally able to speak to each other, the language of colonization itself kept appearing in the novel. For instance, a tragic event happened as a white man got killed by a native, and an expedition to punish the natives was sent. Let's hear more about it.
A white man was speared mortally by an Aboriginal man, and the governor decided to send out a punitive expedition of soldiers, and one man had speared one white man. The governor gave the order that this party of soldiers was to go out and either capture 6 Aboriginal men, or if they couldn't be captured, to kill 6 Aboriginal men. Mr. Rook, friend of Tuggeran, a person in whose mouth their language was beginning to take shape, marching with the others, the musket over his shoulder. He could not think of the words that would turn Silk away. "Do you know, Silk," he exclaimed, hearing his voice a little wild, "I have found that they use the dual plural, like Greek. Imagine, Silk, a race of people using a language as supple as that of Sophocles and Homer. If he refuses to go on the expedition, it's the end of his career. It may even be the end of his life."
This passage truly illustrates a shift in the novel, in the story, because Rook, who spent his time trying to socialize with the natives, now has the order to kill some of them. It seems like he tried to ease the tensions between the two sides by talking about language and his fascination about the way they speak. But unfortunately, this order has to be executed. As we're being told, Rook is also a soldier, and he has to obey the orders. If he doesn't, he might be killed, because that would be considered mutiny. In the end, he goes there anyway, but he is always regretted doing that. If we take the example of William Dawes, when he left Australia, he dedicated his time to abolish slavery. So that really shows that the characters in this novel, at least Rook, really tries to keep peaceful interactions between the natives and the British men. It seems to be a very difficult job to do, and sadly, as history tells us, the natives have had to deal with the language of colonization more and more as their lands kept getting stolen by the British men. To conclude this idea of language in The Lieutenant, we have seen that language worked as they managed to learn how to speak the native language. However, lots of aggressive and violent behaviors happened, and this caused lots of issues that surmount this idea of colonization and how it speaks to the natives. The British men would go there and punish the natives, and as time passes by, their people would suffer the consequences of colonization. On the other hand, even if some characters in the book doubted that lots of people would be interested in reading the notebooks on the Aboriginal language, it still showed itself to be really useful, simply because it's been used in this novel, and it is also easily accessible on the internet for anyone to read. In a way, these interactions that are pictured in the book managed to save one of the most important things of culture, which is language, and thanks to the studies of these linguists, we have now a trace of its existence. This was my summary of the notion of language in The Lieutenant. I hope you liked my presentation. If you do have any question, please let me know and I will try to reply to them as soon as I can. And as Kate Grenville says,
so I learned a lot writing it, and I really enjoyed it. So I hope that you enjoy living in their world as much as I did. Thanks very much.
So thank you very much, and I'll see you later. Goodbye. Have a good day.